So I was thinking about this and asked the question, well, what if the technology had been different? What if they had first seen the nuclei, not the cell membranes? Then they wouldn't have said, oh, the body is made of atoms. They would have said, oh, look, it's an endlessly divisible fluid. But there are these balls floating in it. So they would figure out what those balls were. And in the process, maybe 20 years later, they'd see the cell membranes. They wouldn't have said we were wrong. They would have said, oh, look, the fluid space, it has divisions in it, and they're semi-permeable. So it's not, so flow is a little bit more difficult. It's impeded. But they wouldn't have changed their model. The body would be fluid, and Western medicine and Western biology would be a fluid model, which turns out, incidentally, to be a much easier way to analyze and explain a lot of acupuncture data, which isn't anatomically based. And if you can't describe it in terms of anatomy, you can't describe it in terms of its building blocks, namely cells, which is probably why we've had such a hard time understanding what acupuncture is. So from that perspective, cells aren't a fundamental thing. At a lower level of scale, it's just biomolecules self-organizing themselves in the fluid. So are biomolecules a thing? Well, they're just self-organizing atoms. Well, what about atoms? Well, they're just self-organizing subatomic particles, which are smaller, self-organizing smaller subatomic particles. The next level down, no one's sure what those are. They might be strings, they might be smaller particles, but there is nothing smaller because now we're down at the Planck length, 10 to the minus 36th meters, I think. I'm a liver pathologist. And at that level, they're not subdividing into smaller things. They're just coming in and out of existence. It's energy turning into matter, which turns back into energy in what's called the quantum foam. And the details of that vary depending on what theory you have. But what physicists all agree on is, out of the vacuum, stuff is erupting. And that stuff, whatever it erupts into, whether it's strings or some other tiny thing, then self-organize into the larger scale subatomic particles, into bigger subatomic particles, into atoms, into molecules, into the universe. So suddenly the entire universe is a self-organizing system in which no thing actually exists as a thing. How this gets into consciousness studies, it comes in a couple of ways. First off, there's the idea that in quantum physics, the idea of an observer is essential to the outcome of any experiment. The minute an observation is made in an experiment, a definitive outcome happens. But before that outcome happens, before it's observed, all the possibilities exist in a superposition. Everything is possible. So the classical Schrödinger's cat thing, the cat is both dead and alive in a superposition. Is that really happening? Is it really both dead and alive? There are different philosophical interpretations. But the majority of the founders of quantum physics, and with shades of difference between them, felt that, and this is still the most robust approach to quantum physics, that consciousness is inherent in the universe coming into being at any given moment. So we have this self-organizing universe in which there is no thing that actually has inherent existence. And at its most fundamental levels, consciousness is what drives it, what creates it, what allows it to become what it is in each moment. Then you can't ask what any part of the universe is without asking what's its relationship to consciousness. And that seems to place the idea of consciousness at a lower level of scale than up here where our brain is creating the mind. So this is the essential divide philosophically, is does the brain create mind, or does the universe create mind when it becomes sufficiently complex in structure? And some people would say only a human brain can do that. Some people would say only a primate brain. Some would say only a central nervous system. Some would say only those with a nervous system. It doesn't have to be organized into a central nervous system. So this was actually how I started thinking more deeply about the consciousness aspects, this idea that you could trace sentience all the way down. But then when you tie that together with quantum physics, you suddenly start to get a sense of a more seamless view of the universe. I'm also a Zen student. I've been practicing for 25 years. And one can have experiences in contemplative states that point in the direction also that, you know, consciousness isn't something being produced by here. I can experience my consciousness in other parts of my body. I mean, part of the practice, formal Zen practice, is focusing it in what's in Japanese called the hara, or your second chakra. And it's actually feeling like your mind is situated there. Our habit of feeling like our minds are in our brains comes more because most of our sense organs are up here. It's not because our brain is here. Our face is here. And you can even play games with experiencing it outside of your body. If you know, with enough practice, you can do that sort of thing if you feel like it. But in still deeper states, you get a sense that, oh, actually what underlies the mind is something, some larger mind. Some traditions will describe it as pure awareness, the mind of clear light in Tibetan Buddhism, awareness of awareness. So one can have these experiences that are well documented in many different cultures. Why is that not a viable hypothesis for where mind comes from? And in fact, in Western philosophy, it's not exactly an outsider idea either. A lot of what Plato was talking about, certainly Spinoza, Hegel, Kant, Whitehead, folding quantum physics into all of that with process theory. We're all suggesting in one way or another that consciousness is what things arise out of. It's not a product of the universe. The universe is a product of that. Minnis and I are trying to formalize that view because it hasn't really been formalized in a contemporary, and hopefully eventually, this is his job, mathematical sort of way. My inclination when you put all my streams of thought and experience together is that, yeah, I think actually consciousness is what comes first. And everything arises from that. And I think that's a simpler way to look at the world. The hard problem of consciousness, how do I experience qualia like redness or the taste of a pizza or a happy memory? That's a problem if you think your brain has made your mind. But if you think that mind is what gave rise to the universe, then the entire universe is nothing but qualia. The problem sort of disappears because there isn't anything else. That's all anything is. So in some ways I find that satisfying, although a lot of people find that really irritating.